Good morning, beautiful souls. Welcome to Wake Up with Sonia Poulton and guests. It is exactly 9 a.m. GMT. I am delighted to be here with you. And may I just start by saying, shh, shh, gagging, 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 gagging. UK is under some strange, odd gagging cloud that is going on, which we will explore in some detail. Thank you all for being here this morning. Absolutely wonderful to have you here. Yes, Armand, it really is Friday. What's a new moon, says Shalini. Oh, because, well, moons have 4 quarters until they get to the full moon, which I think is November the 15th this year. I think it's the Hunter moon, but it's a new moon this morning. Bonjour, Stella. Good morning to you, B. And hello, Paula and Steve and Crazy Bunny. Hello, beautiful, beautiful mod of mine. And Jan, how are you? And let me just see. Oh, I've completely lost the thread here already. Jacqueline and Cavan and Julie and did I already say Jan and Randy and Cheryl and Greg and Cavan and Shug and all of you, and grand risings to you, London lady. How are you all, you glorious people? Good morning, Colin. And Gillian, grand risings from Belfast to you, darling. Morning, lovely people, says Heppelwyn. And Adele is here and Monica is here. Monica has organised and helped me set up one of our guests today, and I'm very grateful to her. This is the importance of you viewers out there. I mean, there's many things that make you important, and this is one of them. Good morning, Franco. Good morning, Reba and Mrs. Pirate and Martin Smith. Not the Martin Smith, eh? And Rachel and Shinri, good morning to you. Has everybody hit the coming into the building button? My mod wants to know. Hello, Northern Warrior and Julie and Purple Petunia and Maria. Thank you all, glorious people, for being here. I truly, truly appreciate it. Right, what's coming up today on our show? Yes, our show. We will be joined by journalist Callum Smiles, live from the US, who's on the presidential election trail. Also joined by Gazza, the hillbilly halfwit, and he isn't a halfwit at all, according to the conversation I had with him yesterday. And we're going to be talking about the budget's impact on farmers and the wider picture. And we'll also be joined by Dr. Mark Griffiths, author of Sexual Perversions and Paraphilias, and A to Z. It's an absolutely fascinating book. And I'll be looking at Rachel Reeves and how her budget is fit for a true Fabian. And also Axel Rudakabana, new charges and a whole new gagging has descended on the UK. Plus, Mohamed Al-Fayed, former owner of Harrods, hundreds of new claims against him. Then there's the pilot who was cleared of child kidnap, taking a child from outside Harrods, but has now been charged with child abuse images. And Elon Musk, a lawsuit and a new compound, plus the absolute devastation in Valencia. But did we already have warnings about this? And what happened to Levi Davis, one of our viewers wants to know. Plus, I'll be looking at Paramount's new series about men being under curfew. And then at the end, I'm going to be talking about how there is no shame in asking for help. So as you can see, we have a full plate. Yes, we do. We do indeed. And hello to Joanne, who left a comment saying, look forward to every Monday and Friday morning for this show. Absolutely love it. Brilliant interviews, extremely interesting and accessible. I always learn something, greatly appreciated. And I greatly appreciate that comment. Thank you, Joanne. We are constantly growing and developing and learning around here, and that's the important thing, really. And lovely to see that the Curly crew is now taking us on their trips. So me and the kids now proudly play your show anywhere we go. Off to, is that Wales? Off to Walsh with our Sonia in the speaker, spitting truths and keeping mummy sane. Absolutely love that. And I don't know about you, but I made the fatal mistake of opening sweets intended for children yesterday afternoon. And suddenly I seem to be surrounded by rappers. And hello and welcome and thank you to everybody who is here, old and new alike. Today is November the 1st. November the 1st. Day of the Dead. The Day of the Dead is a holiday which is traditionally celebrated usually around the 31st or November the 1st or November the 2nd. And the idea is it's about paying respects and remembering friends and family who have passed on to another plane. A whole better plane, frankly. That's my understanding of it anyway. Right. Before we bring in our first guest, just want to catch up with what happened on Monday. On Monday, activist Tommy Robinson was jailed for 18 months after he admitted to being in contempt of court by repeating false accusations about a Syrian refugee. This included Robinson's film Silenced, which he published on social media, including on X, and playing the film publicly in London's Trafalgar Square at a rally and repeating the allegations in published interviews online. The judge, Justice Johnson, said the breaches were not accidental or negligent or merely reckless. There was a degree of sophistication in the breaches in that they involved the planned release of material in a manner that was designed to seek to achieve maximum coverage. Sorry about that. All his actions suggest that he regards himself as being above the law, the judge said. Nobody is above the law. Well, except the royals, of course. The lawyer argued that Robinson's lawyer argued that he did this, he acted this way, and he accepts his culpability because he passionately believes in free speech. Last Saturday, of course, thousands of Robinson's supporters gathered in central London for a rally, an event he missed because he was already in police custody. And I find it really interesting, the whole issue. I mean, the debate around Tommy Robinson is extremely diverse. You have the people who believe unquestionably that he is a warrior for the truth, that he is a warrior for the truth and he's one of us. And then you have people believing that he is the ultimate state asset and a plant, and point to the fact that, you know, he was in custody, he left everybody else out on the streets, anything could have happened to them at that protest. So I think that it's really interesting, and if nothing else, he's like a lightning rod for opinion. But one of the things that I found most bizarre, did anybody see the court illustrations of him? They were really, let me put these, look at that, none of them look like him. Absolutely none of them look like him. I wonder if I can just do a full screen layout. Look at that. None of them look like him. Who are these artists? Anyway, so that's it really. Of course, he's going to be out in less time than that because he pleaded guilty, and that always bodes very well. And so, as I say, he divides opinion. There's no doubt about it. Certainly, even on this live stream. I would love to have Tommy on. He'd be very welcome, obviously, once he's out of prison. So, yes, absolutely. Why was he not arrested on arrival by border force, says Marcuson. And Peter is saying, good morning, everyone. George says, only the British establishment cabal are above the law, it seems. Absolutely. Soul Sam said it's the only face they can draw. And Dr. Kim Pirelli is not convinced at all. 100k legal kitty to fight a case when he pled guilty, and now there's a fundraiser for his kids. Yeah, sure. And Health Freedom UK said it's probably not him. It doesn't look like him. In all fairness, it doesn't look like him at all. Let me take a glug of water. My voice is already going. You know, the thing obviously about those colds is they kind of fluctuate, don't they? They come in and out all the time. I'm shortly going to be joined by our first guest. Delighted to be talking to him. You know, around here, we're not so much interested in experts, right? Because often they're sort of, you know, they only have a sort of academic understanding about how our world works. So I'm interested in real people who are, you know, toiling the land and are out there and know what is impacting them and how it impacts them. So obviously, one of the biggest stories this week in the UK is regarding Axel Rudakabana, the man alleged to have murdered 3 schoolgirls at a holiday club in Southport on July 29th this year. And I will be talking in more detail about that, but obviously absolutely adhering to the fact that it is a live case and sub judice rules, contempt of court, absolutely exist and are very real, and I respect that, and I will make sure not to trespass on that in any way, because the one thing we have to make sure of, and that is there is no mistrial, any problems around that trial. But I think everything else that is existing and happening around this case is fascinating, including the response from our own parliament. Right, on that note, let's bring in our first guest. Let us not even hang around, because I can see him here. There he is. Yes. Good morning, Gazza.
Hello, how are you all? How's everybody? How
I,
are you,
I,
Sonia?
I'm grand, thank you. You are known as Gazza the Hillbilly Halfwit. Did you
I
name
am.
yourself Gazza?
Well, do you want to know how that name came
I,
about?
I do. Is it polite enough?
Yeah, basically, I'm madly into Northern Soul music,
Ah,
and I had my phone in my pocket, and I was playing some Soul music, and I walked up the yard, and my missus saw me at the window, and I was dancing coming up the yard, and she said, "You look like a hillbilly halfwit," and I
love
thought,
it.
and I thought it was a bit of fun, so that's why I called it the channel.
Well, we love that. And also, can you do the Northern Soul dance?
I can, yes.
I used to work for Echoes. Do you know Echoes? Echoes used to cover Northern Soul a lot and blues and soul. And also I grew up alongside people who were Northern Soul dancers as well. So I have some fondness for
Oh,
Northern Soul. Oh,
it's
yes, I do.
addictive. It really is addictive. Fair play.
Yeah, yeah, I love the shuffle. It's a really good shuffle. Anyway, I haven't actually, you'll be surprised to hear, I haven't brought Gazza on to talk about Northern Soul, although that is a good topic in its own right. Yes, it is. No, I brought Gazza on because dear Monica, one of our viewers, had sent me Gazza's video. And Gazza was talking about the impact of Rachel Reeves' budget on farmers because Gazza is a passionate smallholder farmer, as he describes himself, an old school agricultural mechanic who can fix various vehicles. I know the type. I know the type well. You have a channel on YouTube, obviously, where you've been talking about this issue. Just give us a little bit of your background, first of all. So, about your small holding.
Well, I grew up from a young boy when both sides of my grandparents and my parents' side had hill farms, quite large hill farms, and my father had this farm I'm on now had a farm, and so I've been farming all my life as a young lad, and then as I grew up, then we uh, just went out to work in factories and on the forestry, and then the last few years of my life I've been on the farm here now, and a bit of a slower pace really, because I
Might
had a problem with my eyesight in my late 30s.
might get even slower if it's down to the people, the powers
Yeah.
that be. And the thing is, so here's the thing, and I think it's interesting because immediately what you've outlined is what we know, and that is largely farms are handed down, farms stay within
Yes.
families, farming community. I come from the Cotswolds. I know about farming communities. So Rachel Reeves' budget is absolutely an attack on farmers. She said there's three major changes affecting inheritance tax. These reforms will take place from April 2026. A reform of agricultural and business relief, which essentially, you're going to help me understand this better, but essentially means that the first million pounds of the farm will be free from the death duty, but the remaining taxed at 20% or 50% of everything. Have I got that
Yeah,
right?
it's quite complicated. I'm no expert on it, but I looked at it myself and in detail. And what it is the f- it's easier to understand it if you look at it in acres of ground. So 100 acres of ground is roughly worth £1 million. So if you look at it like that, it's a bit easier to understand it. So the way I uh, can explain it is the first 100 acres of ground, not including your house or machinery or anything, is free from it, and then all the 100 acres after are charged on 50%. Sorry, 20% of 50%. So if you imagine you had a 500-acre farm, the first 100 acres would be free, and then the 400 after would be charged. You'd be charged for the 200 acres. So it would be 100 every 100 acres. It would be 100,000
How
death
does
duty.
how does that affect somebody like you in reality?
Well, my farm isn't a massive farm. I'm only a small holder, and I'm just on the edge of this, so it will affect me. But if what the people don't realize is, if you're a farms, most farms are from 250 to 500 acres in the area I live.
Right.
So that's how it is in Wales. It's smaller, really. Obviously, you get bigger farms, but if you've got a house that is, say, 500 or £1 million, all your ground goes into this. Or if you've got any savings. So after that, they're doing death duties for £100,000 for every 100 acres you have. So for a 1,000-acre farm, it would be £900,000 death duties. And that's just on the ground. So it's
Goodness
crazy.
me. Well, farmers, the thing is, there's this myth that farmers are all go to the Royal Agricultural College, right, in Cirencester, where I was born, and that they come from very posh, rich families. That isn't true at all. We know that. But
Yeah.
we also know that this is a continuation of the attack on farmers. Obviously, this year we've had widespread global protests for farmers, no food, that whole idea, because as we know, the farming industry is under significant attack, and not least from people like Bill Gates, who is buying up farmland. I can't help but think, Gazza, that it wasn't a coincidence that Bill Gates and Larry Fink rocked up in Parliament just a couple of weeks ago to meet Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. What do you think?
Well, if people who watch my videos, I go into detail. About 12 months ago, I started, before my channel became a bit more like it is now, it was just a normal channel, just doing it for a bit of fun, just to look back on. And when the protest started 12 months ago, I started putting up a few political things, helping the protest in Wales. And that's when my journey started. And I started looking into all this corruption in Wales and the things like you've just put up there. And I was absolutely amazed at how crooked this system is. And we're basically being, I still think we're in the EU in Wales, to be honest with you. They're still taking orders from the EU. A lot of people won't admit it, but they go there very often. And when Mark Drakeford gave up to be leader, he took a journey there the day before he gave up. So anyway, that's how I started. And
we know they're all connected, aren't they? They're all answering to WEF for the most part, World Economic Forum. That's all what they're part of. The UN, the 2030 agenda. It's all part of the same thing. And unfortunately, Gazza is quiet. Right. Have you got a microphone on you? Gazza, can you move your microphone a little bit closer to your mouth?
Hold on. How is that? Is that better?
Is that better? I mean, I can hear Gazza perfectly. It's just, they were just a couple of people were saying in the comments it was a bit quiet, but I can hear you perfectly. Let's carry on talking. Yes. Okay. So this is all part of a wider agenda, right?
Yes. Now, when I started looking into this, I found out there was lots of people who are funding the Labour Party, who are anarchists, and one of them was called Dale Vince, and he has funded the Labour Party for the last 10 years. But more than this, he gave Starmer £20,000 personally. He gave Andy Burnham £20,000 personally when he was an MP. And the second in command, what's her name? I can't remember her name now.
The second in command? You mean Yvette Cooper?
No, hold on. I did write it down here somewhere. When I was looking at it, what's her name? I can't remember. Anyway, they gave her £10,000 as well, and he was funding Extinction.
Oh, Angela Rayner, you talking about?
That's it. He gave Angela Rayner, and he also gave her £100,000. Sorry, he gave her £10,000 really for that. So, what I noticed was lots of these people who are funding the Labour Party are anti-farming.
Yes.
And especially in Wales, they're pretty nutty on this nut zero, as I call it.
Yeah.
And they're all activists. And in Wales, the Parliament has really been taken over by activists who hate farmers for some bizarre reason. I don't get it.
Right.
And Mark Drakeford, when he was the leader, was giving answers in the Senate, and he's basically he hates our guts for some reason. I have no idea why. And he hates coal mining now, and he hates steel working, and it's the nuttiest thing I've ever seen.
It's groupthink, though, isn't it? It's a groupthink. There appears to be a kind of, certainly in the UK, an absolute hatred of the working man and woman, right? That appears to be going on. And we know that that's kind of the elitist parasitical mindset, right? Because we are kind of, they are taught to view us as plebs, as if we are. And the thing is, I think that this attack on farmers is really interesting because obviously we're talking about people who are Marxists, communists, and it is all about stripping you of the land, right? I'm going to talk in more detail after you about the kind of motivations that drive Rachel Reeves and where she's coming from and what she's part of. But people like you are on the sharp end of it. But this has sparked enormous backlash. People are very upset about this, right?
Well, they should be, because people think farmers are making a lot of money. There is a percentage of farmers at the top that make a lot of money, but especially where I live, they're living hand to mouth. Now, I had a message on my channel. Could I read it to you? It's only a few lines.
As long as it's not sweary or anything, is it all fine?
No.
Go for it.
A girl called Sarah. She says, my family have a small arable farm, 250 acres-ish, and they lost 80,000 last year, and they made a profit of 17,000 the year before. This year's harvest is a disaster. This could be the final nail in the coffin. And that's how it is. Most farming families are living off less than £30,000 a year in reality.
That is the reality right there. Yeah. That is the reality right there. And the thing is that, I mean, I don't eat meat, but the point is farmers produce so much more than meat, right? Farmers literally produce the staple on our plates, right?
Yeah.
And so we all have an interest in making sure you survive. But the problem is farmers are on the sharp end of the net zero agenda, where farmland is being bought up. What are your thoughts about that? Because obviously you mentioned Dale Vince and the involvement.
Yes, Dale Vince. I didn't realize till I looked into it. I did a video on him, and you've got to be careful because he does like to sue you. So was very careful about.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to be sued.
Yeah, so I went onto his own stuff that he put out himself. So it was his own literature.
Good.
And I didn't realize that he was feeding a huge percentage. He's in charge of feeding a huge percentage of people, young kids in school. He's got his own company, and he says on there himself he wants them to eat small little things of grass instead of meat. That's what his aim is for children in this country. And I was like, it's a job to believe stuff you read sometimes, but this come from his own company website.
Well, there is very much a move, isn't there, to move people away from eating meat to eating bugs and insects. I mean, we know that it's an active move that's taking place. Okay, but you can guarantee that the royal family and politicians will not be eating bugs. They'll be eating, prime steak and, prime meat. That's the reality, isn't it? That's where they are. So this is so serious, really, because this is your livelihood. And if our farmers go, we are in really serious trouble. So how can we get behind you? Is there, because I do remember earlier this year, Wales out of the UK was at the forefront of protesting regarding farming, right? And although we did have some people drive tractors past the House of Parliament, which was great as well. But is there a movement? We need a movement again, don't we?
Well, this is something that I am different to most farmers here, because I am not attached to no farming union, nothing. And I think they are working with the enemy, if you put it. Now, the farming press, when there was a protest in Wales last year, I thought it was very, very strange when the NFU and the Farmers Union of Wales got involved, and they did a protest in Cardiff with the Wellingtons, and it all looked great, but they stopped all the public from turning up. I've listened to people who are on my channel said they turned up to support the farmers, and they were stopped there. That the Farming Union actually stopped supporters going there to support them, and then after that there was no more protesting.
So are you telling me that the Farmers Union are acting like gatekeepers?
Yeah, I think it's organised. What is the word? Organised. They are involved in it. They decide as much as anybody, but they're pretending as if they do something a few weeks beforehand.
Well, that's that whole thing of them picking the powers that be, picking the opposition, right?
Yeah, organised opposition. That's the word.
Right, exactly. So So they're not protecting you. The Farmers Union in Wales are not protecting you. Is that what you're saying?
I personally think that if somebody can say anything that's happened that they've done that has made anything change since then, it's nothing. That when these protests started, they were happening all over the world, and there was like an embargo. And I was trying to share some of the stuff from France on my channel, and they took my monetization away the day after.
Wow.
And I was having I still have it now. People comment on my videos, and the comments are just removed. They're
Same.
having to comment 4 times. Now, there's a really bizarre situation where I think we've got a religious cult in charge of politics in the UK, of this nut zero, and they're not right in the head, to be honest with you. I think it's like an academic cult, in my opinion.
Yeah, it does feel very cult-like. Half the stuff they say makes absolutely no sense whatsoever and is not borne out by science. It's anti-science, a lot of the stuff that they're chatting. We talk a lot around here about the 2030 agenda, and I'm probably now going to start calling it nut zero because it's so much better. It's so much better.
But yeah, that's what I started calling it, because when I mention the climate and anything on my channel, they put a warning below, so I have to make up words to make it so it doesn't get a warning on. See?
Yeah, let me read you some of these comments. Yes, I agree, MT70. Where were you unions when they were pushing the arms spears onto working people? Absolutely. The unions have been a big fat failure over the last 4 years. No doubt about it. They're completely captured, and they're representing the powers that be far more than they're representing working people. No doubt about it. Melvin said it's a cult interlinked with other cults. It is. And they all sound cultish, don't they? Nut zero. Cheeky likes it. I like it too. Gazza, before you leave us, give us a parting shot. What do you want people to know?
Well, I want people to understand that the farming community, like myself, we're all devoted our lives to feeding people. There's like a con trick has happened in the media where they've twisted our words around, and the media have twisted things around to hate the people that are actually producing the food for you to live every day. Yeah. And if you have a meal today, even if you're vegetarian or vegan or whatever, it's been produced by a farmer somewhere in the world.
Fact.
And like I said, we devote our lives to it. And it's a bit weird how the politicians have turned it into how we are destroying the planet when we're far from it. My farm, for instance, I love it to death. I love every moment here. I would not do anything to harm the wildlife on the farm. I love the place to death, and all my farming friends are the same.
Yeah. The problem with politicians, Gaz, is they've turned the people into the enemies, and they've made farmers the enemies. And there's an agenda behind that. And we all know what it is. Everybody, I will put a link to Gaz's channel in the description at the end of the stream. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please do keep us up to speed with any changes that are directly impacting you. You're always welcome back on here, Gaz. Take good care of yourself. Everybody, Gazza, the hillbilly halfwit. Isn't he lovely? Lovely to have you with us. Sonia. Pleasure. Take good care of yourself. Absolutely great. I love that. Real, no farm, no equals no food. Simple, says Kat. Bill Gates needs to go, says Robin. Yeah, but I mean, what a coincidence that he rocked up at Downing Street with Larry Fink, who's also buying up large swathes of land. What is going on? What is going on? Cheers, Gazza, says Hoax. Well worth following to keep updated, says George. Absolutely. I will put a link in the description. Sorry, missed most of that. Was on work phone, says Shalini. Shalini, you putting work before this? What do you call it when a cow grows facial hair? A moustache, says Randy. I see. Thank you, Randy, for that. Lovely. Right. I don't want to get into another story before our next guest arrives, because it would just complicate issues. So hopefully he will arrive any moment. Yes, my job is a feckin' nightmare, says Shalini. I hear you, Shalini. No, I don't hear you, actually. I love my job. And by the way, I did just try to put his name on the screen, because my mods have made it very clear to me that you lovely people in the chat want names on the screen. And I just tried to put it, and it was telling me from this StreamYard that the names were already on the screen. That's what it was telling me. And our next guest has already arrived, which is just fantastic, because poor love. He's halfway across the world. Good morning. It's Callum, the unconventional journalist, and he's in US. What's on your hat, Callum? Good job you're not going into a supermarket. Somebody might try and box you. People are losing their rag over people wearing MAGA hats, aren't they?
Well, if I speak quietly, can you hear me?
We can hear you beautifully. Absolutely
Good, because
beautifully.
Calvin Robinson's asleep next door, and he's I don't want to wake him.
No, definitely don't want to wake him. Right. So thank you so much for being here with us. When did you arrive in the US?
So I got here on the Monday evening. I flew into New York. I then drove into Philly, and then just happened to be that Trump was doing an event an hour up the road. So I
Mad.
went
That's
to that,
mad. That is
and
now the thing is what I do love about what you do, Callum, is you're not afraid to get up off your tush and get moving, right? You are what I consider a roaming journalist. What I was when I was your age, right, and a little bit older. But and it's out there that you can really get a taste of what is really going on, right? So we're going to pick your brains. We want to hear it all as much as you humanly can tell us, right? So obviously you are there for the presidential election. You will be there during and after it, won't you?
yes.
Why did you make that decision to go?
Well, you know me, Sonia. I like to find out for myself. I like to really see what's going on and actually get a feel for it. As you and I both know, all the European mainstream media is all very anti-Trump. Even if there's something they thought he did well, they can't bring themselves to go, look, we hate this guy, but you know what? He was good at A or good at B or good at C. So I thought I want to actually come and see what Americans think, because obviously the media is similar out here, but it's becoming a bit less so. I think maybe because they think you might win and
Really?
they want to get back
Oh,
on the good
that
side.
one, that twist. I know that twist that they do. So obviously you arrived, you went straight to a rally. Tell us about the rally. What was it like?
Electric. It was absolutely fantastic.
I mean, we don't do political electioneering in the UK like they do in the US, do we?
No, absolutely not. And you know what I was thinking when I left? Because I set my camera to record the whole Trump section, and it was an hour and 20 minutes long. And throughout a lot of it, he was saying funny stuff, and he would laugh, the crowd would laugh, and it come to the end of it, I thought, I just got free tickets to the hottest comedian right now, and I will never be at an event like this again in my life. What an amazing experience.
Fantastic
But
experience.
the interesting thing was, so I was walking around the crowd beforehand and speaking to people, blacks, whites, Asians, Indians,
It's very
but they were
mixed that
all
he acts.
they were all saying, like, yeah, okay, I'm black, but I'm not a black American. I'm an American, or I'm not an Indian American. I'm an American. So he seems to have united so many ordinary, everyday people under the umbrella of being an American.
That's interesting because obviously the other side are very much about identity to such a degree that they're even willing to lie about the identity of the woman they're hoping to get into the White House because identity is all to them, right? So it's very interesting you say that. So you're saying that actually the Trump side is much more of a unifying force than the other side in your experience.
Absolutely. And you know what? So obviously I landed in New York. I've been to Philadelphia and Allentown in Pennsylvania. I spent the past 2 days in DC, where weirdly I saw a fair few of these. It'll be really, this is something I probably tell everyone to look out for this election actually. Go and see how many votes Trump got in Washington DC last time, and keep an eye out for how much he gets this time, because that'll be an interesting thing to see. But yeah, like what have seen is Kamala voters Trump voters, disillusioned voters.
Ah, interesting. I mean, that is interesting, isn't it? And yeah, I've seen some of the interviews where you've just been, you've been talking to people on the streets and everything, and that's where you really find out what Americans are really thinking. What so far is the feedback regarding both these characters?
Well, interestingly, I bumped the hotel I was staying at in DC. Where I met the most interesting people. There's a Christian group called U-Turn for Christ, and I didn't know about this group until after chatting to someone. But basically, having breakfast at the hotel, if it's not a pharmaceutical advert, it's a political advert, but they're really dramatized. And I said, "Excuse me, do you Americans like buy into the dramatization of all these political adverts?" And the guy goes, "No, they're all just liars." I was like, "Oh, so who are you? Do you support anyone?" He goes, "Well, I'm with this Christian group, and we've come to America to pray for Donald Trump because
Wow.
he's not a politician. He's not like these people. He's the only person who we think can save America." So yeah, normal people, and I use that term loosely in America, they really do think that he's a force for good because he's not a politician.
So, so obviously that in itself is interesting. So, one of the main issues, because I saw a breakdown of how similar and how different Harris and Trump are, what are their thoughts? But the one factor where they appear to have very similar thoughts is to do with the Middle East, right? Which for many people is problematic because people want there to be much more decisive action taken regarding what Israel are doing and issues within Gaza. What in America, the people that you've talked to, do they care?
They don't necessarily care for Israel and Gaza. They do care that they are not involved militarily. So
Right.
yes, the
Mm.
people that support him, they don't want to go and fight someone else's wars. They're sick of it.
See, here's the thing is that America, in many respects, kind of like, how patriotic many people have become in the UK. That Americans were first and foremost far more patriotic than people in the UK during my lifetime. And that started to change. So, because you walk around America and people have got the flag flying from their front porch, right? That's quite a common sight in certain parts of America. So, what you're saying is that going back to that thing again, the MAGA thing, which many people find very divisive. I've literally seen people attacked for wearing that hat, which is outrageous, absolutely outrageous. But so I think my point really is that what you're saying is that Trump's strength for people is about like returning America to what they believe it should be. Is that kind of like the key issue?
Yeah, I think from what I've gathered, I think a lot of people here want to be isolationist. They don't
Okay,
want to be the world's police. They don't want to go and interfere elsewhere. They just want to get on with their lives. I think they've
right.
realised now, I'm 30 next year. For most of my life, I can remember a time where the Americans and us are meddling elsewhere. So Americans that have been alive longer remember that for longer, and they don't
Mhm.
want that memory to continue. They want to just get on with their lives, and they appreciate the Donald Trump idea of, I don't want to send your sons and daughters to a country to die in another country needlessly. It's quite interesting actually. There was at the rally, um, one of the like things that came on the big screen. It was a story from an American Army reservist, and it was when they were out in Iraq, and they were basically meant to get this flight home, and somewhere along the chain, someone messed up, and this flight didn't turn up. And because that didn't happen, it was then the flight's not coming. You're going to have to stay in Iraq for a few more weeks.
Mm.
And Donald Trump heard about it, and he went, right, send my jet, go get him, go bring him home. So, but because it was too small for this whole regiment, it flew out to Iraq, picked half up, flew back to Miami, dropped them there, refueled, because it was like the closest point, and flew back out again. And this was just Donald Trump using his own money, his own jet, to go pick up what he thought were true, honourable Americans. So
Curious.
all the military here, they're big Trump fans. All the mums that don't want their kids to go to war are big Trump fans.
That's a whole huge demographic right there. Who wants their children to go to war? I mean, that's kind of the reality. So obviously we're just days away, right, from the actual election itself. Any idea which way it might go?
Well, that's the interesting thing. You're talking to a lot of people here. They all go, "Yeah, I think Trump will win," but, and then they all go back to what they think is fraud. And the evidence last time suggested there was a lot of fraud. But a lot of these people at the time, they didn't think that his claims were necessarily true, even though there's a lot of evidence that says it was. But because of how poor this term has been, it's almost like people are like, surely they didn't win because it's been terrible.
Right.
And they're already
Right.
seeing things. I think it was CNN ran a rehearsal of Harris winning Pennsylvania by 5%. So already people here are going, well, there you go. They've stolen it again. And they've been trying to kick people out of voter lines for early voting. So I was talking to someone who was at Bucks County in Pennsylvania, who was told he himself was in the line, and the workers there were saying, "Oh, you have to go away and come back tomorrow." He's like, "Well,
I saw
no,
that. I've
I've
seen
been in this
that as
queue for a
well.
while,
Yeah.
and the polling is open. Why are you sending me away?"
Yeah, it's curious, isn't it? I did see one poll line where they said, right, we're cutting off the poll at this line at 2:30 because it takes so long to process you, even though we're going until 4 o'clock. People were like, what? And the thing is that sometimes people have to take time off of work to do those things, right? Not necessarily something they can keep repeating every day until they finally get to it. Now, MT70 says in our comments a comment which I hear often, and that is democracy is an illusion. Certainly in the UK is absolutely an illusion. We know we are not living in a democracy anymore because of the globalist structure that we are part of. So is America any different? Do you feel there is democracy there?
Well, technically, it's not a democracy, and that's what a lot of people mistake.
Right.
And especially American politicians, I often find it's interesting when they go, "Our democracy is under threat." Because it's a constitutional republic, it's actually not a democracy.
Oh.
We've got a video coming up soon, actually, that I edited yesterday, basically explaining how the Electoral College works.
It's difficult, isn't it? It's so difficult. Can you give us a brief overview of it?
Okay, so technically, in America, every single election comes down to popular vote, except for the presidential election. So on paper, everyday people voting actually doesn't mean anything because it comes down to the 538 electoral college members spread around the country, who then it will be on November or December the 17th. It's a bit early, my mind's a bit fried.
You're doing
And
brilliantly.
they cast their votes for who is going to be the president. Now, under the Constitution, let's say Georgia goes Democrat, the electoral college votes that they have do not have to go to the Democrat candidate. They could give it to absolutely anyone. So even someone who isn't in the race, and they would be known as a faithless elector. So you hear the phrase 270 to win because 270 is the first number for a majority when it comes to 538 divided by 2. But 538 divided by 2 can be 269 each, which is when it then comes down to the House of Representatives, Congress,
Yes.
choosing the president, and the Senate chooses the vice president. So in theory, it could then be you have a president from one party and a vice president from the other. But that when House of Congress chooses the president, each state has one vote. So let's use Georgia for an example again. If last time, in the last election, it came down to a tie, Georgia, you might remember, it was very controversial, but went to the Democrats. However, each state only gets one vote. If it came down to that ruling, there are more Republican congressmen in Georgia, so their vote would have gone to the Republicans. So that's where the popular vote has a little bit more weight,
Right,
but
right,
still not entirely.
right. So it could go any way, really, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah, it's a complete mess.
It's not a foregone conclusion one way or another, is it?
Exactly. So it could be that on paper, one side absolutely walks it, but then those electors could choose someone else. Now, another point to make is, whilst it's not unconstitutional to be a faithless elector, in 32 states plus DC, because DC isn't a state, it is illegal, and all those areas carry different penalties, but they still can.
Oh, it's so complicated. I see Jennifer Lopez was expressing her outrage at Donald Trump. She made this really weird comment. She said to voters in Nevada to give Kamala Harris a Hollywood ending. God, no. So what the hell? I mean, it's really weird, isn't it? All of these people who have come out for Harris, Beyonce and Jennifer Lopez. And
P. Diddy list.
Yes. That is very interesting description. We kind of like that. Listen, Callum, thank you so much for joining us this morning, especially because of the hour that it is. We hear you brilliantly. Hopefully we can get you back on again next week and give us feedback either close to the date or after the date, because you're going to be there after the election. So I think that might probably be the best time to bring you on. So where are you headed to next?
So I landed in Michigan last night, Grand Rapids, and Calvin and I are gonna drive over to Detroit today. It's funny actually, when I landed in Michigan last night, my mum, she loves watching Air Crash Investigation, and every time I kept walking in her living room last week, she had it on. I was like, "Mum, I've got 9 flights to catch. Can you just stop watching it this week?" And as soon as we come into Grand Rapids, the plane was going. And as we were on the tarmac, the captain went, "Ladies and gentlemen, if you can please stay seated. One of the engines is burning."
Oh.
And then you hear the fire brigade coming in.
Oh my God.
Oh no, I'm going to be on one of Mum's episodes.
God. Do take care of yourself, sweetheart.
And then Phoenix is next, and I'm going to go round to the border and head over to California after I've looked at how one can register to vote.
Oh, curious. Interesting. Do let us know how that works out, won't you? You're reporting for, is it Vox Populi?
Yes.
And that people can see that on X and on other social media platforms?
Yeah, and like the link for this specific stuff is on vpusa2024.com. That's 2024 is the numbers.
Marcuson, one of our commenters, says, stay safe out there. False flag, not impossible over the next week. I hear that loud and clear. Callum, do take care of yourself. I will touch base with you later. Everybody, it is Callum Smiles. Now go and get some sleep. And thank you for joining us.
No
Wonderful.
worries. Good
Excellent.
night.
Night, darling. Sweet dreams. How wonderful. How wonderful to have him with us. Absolutely brilliant. And really a good line, right? Really good. Right. Thank you, Callum. Says Healing the Silence. I can't wait to hear the update. Sugar Puff said, I think Kamala might be part of the CIA, Gladio, Al Qaeda faction while Trump works for Israel. Maybe the different factions of the NWO have joined forces now. We should not rule anything out, right? We know what kind of world we're living in. And Shalini said, if folks want to watch live streams on Tuesday next, Maya T and Load Seats will be doing streams. Amazing, lad, says the Curly Crew. Cheers, Callum, says Hoax. Right, before we bring in our next guest, let's have a look at this news this week, because I think it's in need of commenting on, frankly. As I said, one of the biggest stories this week in the UK is regarding Axel Rudakabana, the man alleged to have murdered 3 schoolgirls at a holiday club in Southport on July 29th this year. He is also accused of 10 attempted murders and possession of a knife. The killings, of course, as we know, sparked large-scale protests excuse me, and riots in towns and cities across the UK. Well, this week, as many of you already know, Rudakabana has been charged with 2 further counts, including production of ricin and being in possession of a PDF titled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual. These latest charges came after searches of his home in Banks, Lancashire, Merseyside. In Banks, Lancashire, Merseyside Police Chief Constable Serena Kennedy stated all this at a press conference on Tuesday, so a day after Tommy Robinson was imprisoned. And I do think the timeline is interesting. Searches on Rudakabana were carried out in the days after the Southport attack, although it was not confirmed when the ricin was found. According to the charges authorised by the CPS on Tuesday, the toxin was produced on or before July 29, and Rudakabana was charged with possessing the document between August the 29th, 2021 and July 30th, 2024. A provisional trial date for him has been set for January next year. Now, as I said earlier, it's a live case. It is subject to the same sub judice rules as other live cases, and that is there should be no reporting, commentary, or sharing of information online that could prejudice these procedures. Now, this is standard, yet it's taken in a completely different direction. It was repeated at the press conference by Chief Constable Serena Kennedy, who said, I would strongly advise everyone to avoid speculation about the motivation in this case. The criminal proceedings against Axel Rudakabana are live, and he has a right to a fair trial. Again, this is all standard. And yet, why are people acting as if something special is taking place, something different, something set apart from the norm? And I say that because everybody, from the police chief herself, who back in July had no problem speculating about the type of people her force were going to track down over the next days and months, as she said very menacingly, for protesting. And she said it in deeply threatening tones. So these people were not given the benefit of a fair trial, for starters, but now she's issuing warnings, same as in Parliament. So much so that Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, issued a warning in Parliament on Wednesday prior to the budget. Such were the widespread questions about what did Keir Starmer know about these 2 further charges and when did he know it. So Lindsay Hoyle told Parliament to tread carefully in discussing Southport so as not to prejudice the forthcoming trial. When was the last time you heard the House of Commons be told, tread carefully on this? We have live proceedings on a constant basis, and yet this one they've set apart, right? Hoyle made clear to MPs that there would be no discussion in the House. Many people believe this was to protect Keir Starmer, who had himself potentially prejudiced trials by claiming posts and rioting was the result of far right before any motivation was established. So we need to establish, or rather the courts need to establish, quite rightly, the motivation of Rudakabana, but the Prime Minister and the mainstream media press can establish the motivation of people who were protesting and rioting. And bear in mind, Keir Starmer is a director of public, or rather a former director of public prosecutions. This man knows the law. According to Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson's former aide, Starmer knew about the Al-Qaeda manual when he was demonizing people. Dominic Cummings has been busy tweeting. He said he knew about Al-Qaeda immediately. He spent August lying about far right. He dumped the story out now so the budget would hide it. Could it be that some of the imprisonments, like Lucy Connolly, are unlawful? Could it be that Peter Lynch, who was said to have killed himself, should not have been imprisoned in the first place because it was an unlawful conviction? Because after all, even the Prime Minister had established the motivation of these people before a law court could. And what about the timing of this new information? It's true. This information was released a day before the budget. And Rudakabana was back in court on the day of the budget, a budget that has wreaked havoc on British people, as we will continue to talk about throughout this show. Added to which, Dominic Cummings claims the BBC is involved in the cover-up. Yes, he does. The BBC tweeted, "Government became aware of new Southport charges in last few weeks." That sounds in itself very vague. To which Dominic Cummings responded, "BBC acting as disinformation for Number 10. The PM's office was informed immediately. Read the search, Al-Qaeda, Rising, etc. The BBC uses clever wording, aware of charges to spread more disinformation. The mainstream is the disinformation." Now, don't get me wrong, Dominic Cummings was one of them. But I'm always very happy to see, people who break free, or not break free, I think it was kind of ejected, right? But people who are on the outside spilling the beans about the inside. And the thing is, right, is despite all this information that has come out and these two further charges, police said events had still not been declared a terrorist incident because no motive had been established. And that is where lots of people are going wrong on social media. And it's stuff like this that can get the case thrown out, and no justice for the children or families. Social media is full of people who don't care about justice for these three murdered girls and their families, but only about proving a point. Both sides, right? The pro and anti-Islam brigades are all at it, literally creating subjudice that could result in a mistrial. Okay. And you've had many people piling in. You've had the two people who are vying to be the next Conservative leaders, which is Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch. They're both they've both asked questions about it. We should be asking questions about it, because not about the case. That is for a live trial, right? We have to park that. But we need to be asking questions about what is the role of Keir Starmer regarding people imprisoned. These are important. And can I ask you, why are these the only images we have of Rudakabana? So he actually appeared in court on Wednesday at Westminster Magistrates via video link from HMP Belmarsh, charged with a terror offence and making poison. During the 10-minute hearing, the 18-year-old refused to answer questions, held a sweater over the bottom of his face after being charged with offences under both the Biological Weapons and Terrorism Act. He is accused, as I say, of manufacturing the biological toxin ricin and having a study of a terrorist manual in a PDF form. He did not respond when asked to confirm his name. Security guard told court he had chosen not to talk, and that was what he had also chosen at a previous hearing as well. He's currently facing both sets of proceedings in, looks like likely to be Liverpool Crown Court. The magistrate who was sitting on Wednesday, interestingly, is Paul Goldspring. And you may remember that name because he was also the magistrate who decided that Hugh Edwards should not receive a custodial sentence for watching videos of children being abused. He is the chief magistrate, is Paul Goldspring. So I know there's lots of stuff flying around online regarding Rudakabana's parents. Again, this could be considered sub judice, so I'm not even going to go into those areas. But people are very angry, and rightly so. People have a right to be angry when they feel they've been misled. And the thing about police investigations is you don't always get all the information straight away. And police are not obliged to give us updates. But this is a different case. It's a different case because already the police, including the very police chief who's at the head of this, and our prime minister, both of them, in my opinion and in other people's opinion, have potentially created prejudice for trials that have already gone before. So there are questions to be asked and answered. We have a right, because people are rightly angry, and so they should be. I want to switch on to a completely different subject now, because that's what we do around here. Let me read some of these comments. They're professional liars, says Wee Fat Shug. Christine says, didn't they tell us he was an actor or something? Yeah, there was those images, wasn't there, of him being Doctor Who for children in need, if you remember. It is not. Tara, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Is it not illegal to cover his face in court? Women in burqas have to remove them in courtroom if they're the defendant. I don't know the answer to that, quite honestly, but I'm really sick of seeing these images, frankly. So let's take them off our screen right now. And do you know what? Let's switch gears completely, because I think it's time to. Let's bring Dr. Mark Griffiths to the stage. Good morning, Mark.
Hi there, Sonia.
Great to have you. God, that's a really clear line. Wonderful. We love that. You are a professor of behavioural addiction at Nottingham Trent University. I caught a bus from outside there recently, actually. I was at an event. Very interesting work that you're engaged in, Mark. You study non-substance addiction. We've done that for over 35 years, including addictions to sexual behaviour, which is exactly why, presumably, you've written this book. Okay, sexual perversions and paraphilias and A to Z. And Mark, I honestly, I'm literally not blowing smoke at your behind, but it's one of the most fascinating books. I was sent a PDF of an outline and a breakdown of the topics. It's one of the most fascinating books that I've seen in a long while, because I think the important thing about it and the interesting thing about it is you are discussing a lot of stuff that people out there are discussing, but they have no idea necessarily about it and what it all means from an academic perspective, but you do it in a very accessible way. So Mark, tell us about your work studying non-substance addiction. Why do you do that?
Okay, well, I started my PhD way back in the middle of the 1980s on slot machine addiction. And then I kind of graduated in 1989 onto video game addiction. And then in 1995, I became the very first person, well, actually 1996, became the very first person ever to publish a paper on internet addiction. And then I went on to things like work addiction, sex addiction, exercise addiction, social media addiction, basically any addiction, well, any behaviors that don't involve the drugs.
Right.
I've almost certainly have published papers on it. I mean, people say I'm addicted to publishing papers, which if I am, it's the best addiction that you can have in academia. But I've always been interested in sexual behavior, and I suppose a lot of people are interested in sexual behavior, but I've always been interested in it from a more scientific side. But actually, and in my book, I do actually say that my interest started when I was about 13 years old, and I was totally obsessed with Adam and the Ants.
Me too.
Oh well, and I still love Adam Ant now. He's still one of my heroes. But I mean, when he first started out in kind of 1977, lots of the songs that he was writing were actually about sexual paraphilias and what people would call sexual perversions and sexual deviations. But of course, when he became very popular and he was doing lots of, doing songs like Ant Music and Prince Charming and Stand and Deliver, on every B-side, on the record, and I do mean every single B-side, was a song about a paraphilia. Now, whether it was voyeurism or whether it was sadomasochism or whether it was transvestism, honestly, every single B-side was related to a sexual behavior. And I actually later wrote an article about about all of his songs. I mean, he's written more songs about sexual perversions and paraphilias than anybody. But then when I went to university and I did psychology, mainly because I'd done maths, physics, chemistry and biology at A-level. I thought I want to get away from science. But in fact, when I started doing psychology, it was biology, it was neurobiology, it was statistics, methodology. It was actually really hard science. But there was a lecturer who was a guest lecturer that came to my university in 1986. And to this day, it was still the very best lecture I'd ever heard.
Wow.
It's from a psychiatrist called Dr. Alec Oswald. I have no idea if he's still with us or not. And I was absolutely amazed that this was somebody who his whole professional career was treating people who had various sexual deviations or perversions or paraphilias. And I think that was probably the first time I'd even heard the word paraphilia in that particular lecture. And I was just totally transfixed by it. And when I started lecturing, I mean, I was very young. I finished my PhD at 23, went straight into lecturing.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very young at the time. And that's why I've been in this area nearly 40 years now. And
Got you.
but, people can't believe how long I've been in the field. And it is because I actually started very, very early. But the thing was, I was very luckily when I started my first job at the University of Plymouth. They gave me a course to do on addictions, and at that point, all the addictions I covered were traditional drug addictions, and I just had one lecture on gambling addiction. But over the next 35 years or so, I introduced more and more, non-substance addictions into my lectures, including sex addiction. Okay, and again, in fact, when I went to Nottingham Trent University, not only did they let me do a whole course on addictive behaviours, they also let me do a whole course on sexual behaviour. And that was where I then was managed to kind of start reading other people's work about various aspects of sexual behaviour, including paraphilias. And then, I'd never actually researched in this area, and I actually then started writing. There was a magazine called Bizarre, and I don't know if that is still going. I mean, I used to buy it in W.H. Smith's. It was a monthly magazine, and I started writing for them. So I wrote my first article I wrote for them was 10 bizarre autoerotic deaths, particularly to do with what we call hypoxophilia, people who are sexually aroused by restricting oxygen supply to the brain. Ooh. Okay, and then I wrote another article on apotemnophilia, which was people who are sexually attracted to amputees. So I was doing lots of populist writing, but it actually wasn't until 2012 that I actually wrote my first academic paper on paraphilias. And actually that very first paper was actually about how the internet had made it much easier for people like me to actually research paraphilic behaviors, because it's amazing how you can go out on the internet and find, if you've got a particular sexual interest, there's almost certainly an online group out there that actually, however bizarre or extreme it might be, there's usually an online group out there. And that's how I started collecting data, was through the internet. And it actually, where this all sprang from, and you said about my book, I actually didn't write my book. Now that sounds bizarre, because my book is actually an edited collection of the many blogs that I've written over the years. And it was actually edited by my good friend, Dr. Mike Sutton. We were sitting in the pub one night and he said, you should put all these things into a book. So in fact, Mike did all the heavy lifting here. He took 10 years worth of kind of populist articles I'd written on lots of different strange and unusual and what some people might say are bizarre sexual behaviors, and put it all into the book. And that's the book that's just come out. But also, by writing my blog, what amazed me is, if you go to my blog and you look at the comments underneath some of this, is that, the one example I'll give you, and I hope this isn't too bad for this time in the morning, but I wrote a blog on people who are sexually attracted to flatulence. Okay. Now I thought this was a hypothetical type of paraphilia. So I wrote a blog on it, and what amazed me, the number of people said, I can't believe somebody is actually writing about this from a scientific perspective. And then I actually then in 2013, I published the very first case study of an aproctophile. And this went worldwide. If you type my name, Mark Griffiths, and aproctophilia into Google, you come up with hundreds of news stories. It just went ballistic.
We have
around
so
the world,
many
Sonia.
questions. We have so many questions. First of all, everybody, I have been trying to get Mark's name on the screen. It's Dr. Mark Griffiths, because they say, what's his name? What's his name? Right. So many questions. So many questions. I love this chat already, says Soul Sound. I know, it's mad, isn't it? Absolutely bonkers. So here's the thing. Let me just, where do I start? So first of all, 1996, you were already writing about addictions to the internet. You were well ahead of your game. What were you discovering then about it?
Well, obviously, I mean, it's bizarre actually, Sonia. In 1995, I gave a talk at the British Psychological Society conference about something I called technological addictions. And I was actually talking about my work on video game addiction and slot machine addiction and a bit on television addiction. And somebody asked me, said, have you ever heard of this thing called the internet? And I said, well, actually, I have. And it was only about a month or so before I'd heard of this thing called the internet.
Right.
And I was on an academic kind of discussion group with other academics. And, you know, people were telling me that there were some people who were spending all their time online. They were getting emotional attachments to people they'd never even met, talking away. And this was all to do with typing away with other people that lived in other countries. And I mentioned this in the press conference I gave after this paper. And the next day, all the papers, it were going, oh, professor says, internet will destroy your marriage. I mean, they were all sensationalist kind of articles. But then as a result of that, the Times Higher Education Supplement, as it was called then, said, oh, we saw all the press coverage you got. Would you like to write us a 2,000 word piece on internet addiction? So I wrote a very populist piece. But then I used that to get some small grants to actually research whether people could be genuinely addicted to the internet. Now, I ought to say, now I've come to the position that people are no more addicted to the internet than alcoholics are addicted to bottles, because it's not the internet you're addicted to. It's the things you do on the internet. And so obviously my research then, and it was actually in 2000 and 2001, I published my first papers looking at excessive sexual behavior on the internet. And so, my research says is that a small minority of people do seem to develop addictions on the internet. And I've got a very specific definition of what I mean by addiction. And now I've applied my model of addiction to many, many different types of behavior, including things like social media and other things.
Is there a common, not including substances, but when it comes to non-substance addictions, is there a common theme that kind of links addictions?
Well, yeah, for me, when I talk about addiction, I'm talking about a behavior that completely takes over that person's life. They do it to neglect of everything else. They get genuine withdrawal symptoms, even for people who've got behavioral addictions. They will have increased moodiness, increased irritability, increased frustration, but also on a physiological level, stomach cramps, nausea, hand sweats. You get that in addicted gamblers, addicted video game players who can't engage in their behavior. So there are lots, and that's what I look for. I look for commonalities. But we've got to remember is that every addiction is different. There are quite clearly differences between social media addiction and gambling addiction and heroin addiction. And when I use the word addiction, I am using it in exactly the same way that people use to describe drugs. And the good news is, by my definitions, very few people are genuinely addicted to things like video games or social media.
Oh, that's curious. If there's very few, that means we could help them, be more effective in helping them, right? Because there's a suggestion there that we're almost kind of mischaracterizing what these addicts are. Is that kind of what you're saying?
The thing is, people use the word addiction. The number of people say, "Oh, that TV program, it's addictive watching. This book is addictive reading."
They use it easily, right?
That kind of really positive, engrossing. You're losing yourself. That to me, there's elements of addiction there, but that's not addiction in and of itself.
It's difficult. It's different than having to watch it constantly, repeatedly. It would be, that's different, right? There's a distinction.
Oh, absolutely. And there's obviously a lot. I mean, I've done research now on binge watching. We now get people who sit down and watch Netflix again and again and again. And I love a bit of binge watching. It's great. But it is one of those things that, you can lose sleep over it. You lack of productivity at work. But again, for me, these people are not necessarily, very unlikely to be addicted by my criteria, but quite clearly it's something that can have negative effects on people's lives. So it might be a problematic behavior without necessarily being an addictive behavior.
curious. Some people have only just right now discovered the word paraphilias, and it's a very simple. My understanding of it, it's about, in fact, I'm taking it from your description. Paraphilias from the Greek, beyond usual or typical love, are uncommon types of sexual expression, often more commonly described as sexual deviations, sexual perversions, or disorders of sexual preference, which brings me to one of our questions in the comments. Actually, Callum, who's just joined us from the US, Callum said, can you ask him which of the strange sexual ones interested him the most? And I'm not sexually interested in him, by the way. Callum felt the need to point that out for some reason. So which ones interested you the most, Mark?
Well, I say when I come across, when people talk, it's not that they necessarily interest me. I just find that the kind of seriously, you can't be serious. So, I've got sections in my book on hemorrhoid fetishes, or I've got stuff on people who are sexually aroused by people who are crying. So that one on crying actually does academically interest. I've now actually written 4 scientific papers on what we call dacrophilia, people who are sexually attracted to people who cry. Now, one of the papers we published, Sonia, and this is, I think, it's really interesting. We interviewed 8 people, mainly from an online forum called the Crying Forum, but we also got a few off a website called FetLife, which looks at various fetishistic behaviors. But anyway, even amongst these 8 dacrophiles, we found 3 completely different types of dacrophile. We had what was called a compassionate dacrophile, people who were sexually attracted to people who were showing the more compassionate side of themselves. And actually, these were women, these were mainly women. Now, it's interesting because most paraphilias are very male dominated. But the paper that I did on dacrophilia showed we actually had more females than males that were being interviewed. We also had what we called the kind of dominant dacrophiles. And these are people who actually, they're usually sadomasochists, and they actually get their sexual pleasure from making somebody cry. And then bizarrely, we had one dacrophile who was, believe it or not, we called him a curled lip dacrophile. And this was somebody who got very sexually attracted when people are just about to cry and the bottom lip starts wobbling. And they were just sexually attracted to the bottom lip wobbling. And in fact, they'd gone through films and, actually video recorded little clips of people just about to cry. And that was what made them, that was their sexual attraction. So the thing is, what's bizarre, and I'm using the bizarre in the most general word here,
Sure.
is that people can develop a sexual preference for almost anything that you can think of, whether it's a particular body part or it's a particular substance. There'll be somebody out there that has a sexual preference for this. So the question, what's the most interesting one? The most interesting one is always reading one that I've never heard of, because the things I write about, to me, they're almost like what people would describe as vanilla now. So when I talk about things like zoophilia or sadomasochism, to me, because they're so mainstream now.
Oh, vanilla. That's like a normalization, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that is the thing that I find fascinating about your books. There's all these words that I had no clue of before. And I have to say, when I started to go down them, I found them extraordinary. There's like burping fetishes, right? People are aroused by people burping. And
Yeah.
people are also aroused by the sexual nature of squeezing spots. That's called
Acnophilia.
Acnophilia.
Yeah, can I just say, acnophilia is a made-up word. It's out there on the internet. That most genuine paraphilias have a Greek prefix followed by philia. Acnophilia is a completely made-up. Obviously, I've reported what's out there. There are no academic papers on acnophilia, but I can tell you now the number of squeezing spots websites there are. I mean, you type in, in fact, I think there's something called Dr. Pimple Popper. There's actually a whole program that's dedicated to squeezing spots. But there are some people who are sexually attracted to, basically pus from acne, which is bizarre. And in fact, almost, that people that are sexually attracted to earwax, pus, blood. I mean, you name it, any substance that come out of
extraordinary.
I know. And
you've got, honestly, like we always have a busy live stream chat, right? But people are literally like, cannot believe what they're hearing. I mean, cannot believe what they're hearing. Let me read you some of these comments.
Okay.
And no, Callum, your section was not boring before this. Your section was also brilliant, but completely different. Short Order Cook asks, could you ask, did he find out how these were developed? Is there a common overarching denominator?
Well, I say most paraphilias, you take the Greek word for whatever the behavior or object it is, and you add word philia, which is Greek for love, at the end of it. So in fact, I've actually in my book, because I found things that haven't been cited in the academic literature. So I've got glossophilia, which is people who are sexually attracted to tongues. I've got there's something called Friedophilia. I mean, luckily, I worked with somebody in my department who's Greek. So I used to go to her and say, what's the Greek for this word? And Friedophilia is people who are sexually attracted to eyebrows. So that's how when I've invented these new paraphilias based on people who are sexually attracted to things that say that most people would find unusual. The way you normally do it is to say you've got the Greek prefix and then philia. The other way that people often, if you're out there online, is that there are lots of words for phobias. Okay, and in fact, some people then just flip phobia to philia. So there are lots of paraphilias out there that, so I'm trying to think of one. I think there's one called climacophilia, which is, I think it's the sexual attraction from falling downstairs, but it actually comes from climacophobia. So it's the fear of falling downstairs. I mean, I hope I'm right. I mean, maybe I've got that wrong. I've not got an encyclopedic brain and can remember every single philia. But what I'm saying to you is that some people say there's two ways of that names get formed: Greek suffix followed by philia, or you take a particular phobia and you switch the word phobia to philia, and it suddenly becomes a paraphilia. And that's why, if you type A to Z of paraphilias into the internet, it comes up with lists, 1,000-word long lists. But in fact, most of these things are they're not real paraphilias. They are phobias that have just been transposed. And in fact, my book, it's called An A to Z, not The A to Z. Okay, because there's lots of things that I didn't write about him, but my book.
Exactly, which brings me to my next point, and I found it very interesting. I think you might know what I'm going to say, and that is I found it very curious that you didn't give paedophilia its own category, and I know that it's included in others. Tell us more about that.
Well, the thing about paedophilia is there are just whole libraries on paedophilia. And there is various references to paedophilia through the book in relation to other types of paraphilia. But the thing is trying to condense it down into 1 or 2 pages. I didn't think I could ever do it justice. There's so much research on paedophilia, whereas most of the stuff that I looked at in my book, there's either no research or there's a few isolated case studies. And that's what I wanted to concentrate on, is the things that people don't know about rather than the things that people do know about. I mean, obviously, paedophilia, it's a horrific crime. But as I say, there are just libraries of stuff out there. So I did mention in my
I actually think it was a good shout, to be honest with you. I think it was a good shout because I think it could have distracted from it. And because I think the book as it stands is actually something that people could actually give as a Christmas gift, right?
Well, it is. And the whole point about this book is you don't have to start at the beginning. You just can dip in anywhere, each entry is a standalone entry. I mean, occasionally I will say earlier in the book I mentioned this, but really you don't have to read it from start to finish.
No, you can literally dip in at any point, can't you? And that's interesting. And also, I thought I just see the mention of autogynephilia in the comments, a topic that I'm very interested in. I interviewed Ray Blanchard. And also, obviously, that's now gone kind of like global because Joe Rogan interviewed JD Vance and talked about autogynephilia. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, again, as I say, the idea of kind of having a sexual attraction to somebody who has changed their gender is becoming, like I say, it's become more mainstream. I can't remember it now. I mean, the program I watched, there was I think it's called Sexy Dirty Millions. It was Donald Sutherland, and there's a character in that. One of the Baldwin brothers has actually got a relationship with somebody who is transgender in that. And that, when things like that become more mainstream, as I say, it kind of almost becomes vanilla because it becomes normalized.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? Because the idea that like zoophilia, for example, is becoming normalized and vanilla is really alarming. I've got to ask you some more questions. Mark, I hope you're up for more questions.
Okay, yeah, go.
You've literally set the cat amongst the pigeons here. People cannot believe what they're hearing, right? This is interesting. Is a paraphilia different to a perversion? Asked Jan.
It depends. Like with all these things, we have to go what's called an operational definition. I mean, I've defined paraphilia in the book, and I've basically taken it from what's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. The thing about perversion, I mean, you know, some people, I did wonder whether I should have the word perversion on the front, because people do find it a stigmatizing word. But I mean, you know, if you look at the origins of the word perversion, we're talking about something that's kind of away from the norm, okay? And that's what I'm really talking about here. And, you know, can I also say my book does not pathologize any of these behaviors, because most of the behaviors I'm talking about are what I would call non-normative sexual behaviors. And, you know, most of these behaviors between consenting adults, there's absolutely nothing wrong with them as well. And in that sense, there's nothing perverted about them, because if you've got two or more people that enjoy this particular sexual preference, that doesn't make it a perversion. But the point is, I think most people, I mean, there'll be some things that people will read in the book and that, you know, they will get that ick factor, thinking, oh, that's horrible, or
There's
whatever.
quite a lot of ick going on for me, but that in itself is a curiosity. So what you're really saying is, as long as it's like decent and safe, we shouldn't be kink shaming people as long as it's consensual. But I get that. I absolutely get that. So, and also Soul Dad said, what are the root causes of paraphilias? Well, that's a good one. Coming from a psychological perspective, what do you think?
Okay, for me, and I know there'll be other psychologists out there that don't agree with me, but particularly from the research that I've done on things like aproctophilia and dacrophilia, most people talk about, and it's usually things that are formed early in childhood, and it's what we call, well, I think most people out there might have heard something called classical conditioning. So this is Pavlov's dogs ringing the bell. So this is the idea that the dogs learnt that when the bell rang, it was dinner time, and eventually, you know, what happens over the long run is that the dogs basically become classically conditioned to the bell. The bell means food. This, I think, happens with a lot of sexual behaviors, that early in your, you know, childhood or adolescence, is that you have what we call associative pairing, is that things that are, you know, not sexual at all are basically paired with things that are sexual. And over time, so I can think of one particular case study. I don't think it's in my book, but it talks, well, actually, no, I think it was to do with wedding ring fetishes. You know, and people, you know, there's a guy that basically, when he sat on his babysitter's lap, he used to twiddle her ring on her finger. Now, at that young age, he didn't realize, you know, he felt this is a really lovely feeling. And, you know, basically it became that, you know, rings became something that was related with sex. You know, it got to a point, actually, he could not make love to his wife unless he was twiddling her ring. So, you know, so I think so I'll go back to the one on aproctophilia. You know, people who are sexually attracted to flatulence. The guy I interviewed, called Brad, you know, he was an American, and he said that it all started for him when he was in class when he was about 10 years old, and he was totally besotted by a girl that was in one of the classes, and he wasn't in the class at the time, but he'd heard that this girl who he really fancied had actually farted in front of the rest of the class. Okay, and he said obviously he knew biologically that girls farted, but he hadn't really made that connection. And in his head, the idea that farting and the fact I fancy, this became paired in his head. So this is this associative pairing. Then when he was actually in his teens, he got to a point where he realized that actually hearing somebody fart was actually sexually attracted to him. Basically, Brad told me that he actually made bets with his friend, bets that he would lose. And the losing part of the bet is that a person could fart on him, literally come up to him and fart in his face. He actually made that part. I mean, obviously, the other person didn't realize this was sexual, but this was actually sexual to him. But it's all to do with the pairing of what are sexual experiences for the person with something, you know, an object, a behavior that some people don't see as particularly sexual. I think a lot of paraphilias are rooted in this classically conditioned process.
That so they could be multitudinous then, because we all have individual differences, and whatever impacts you in a certain way is going to impact me differently. So there could be no end to these paraphilias,
Well, of course,
right?
I could probably do another A to Z book with
Yeah.
lots of different ones. I mean, that's the whole thing. And maybe at one point in the future, I'll do a second volume, because I say this book is an A to Z, not the A to Z. These are things, you know, and that's the great thing about the internet. I couldn't have written this book 20 years ago. I mean, it just couldn't have happened. And in fact, lots of the behaviors I talk about come from information collected from online forums. Now, you know, you briefly mentioned zoophilia before. You know, people who are sexually attracted to animals and want to have sex with animals. I have to be honest, I find that abhorrent. And obviously it's illegal in many different jurisdictions. But in my research, I did go on what was called the Beast Forum. This was an online forum.
Oh,
The
God.
Beast Forum has over 100,000 members who are posting videos of, you know, can I just say, there are some things you cannot, and I won't mention things. There
You
are some
can't
things you
unsee,
cannot
right?
unsee when you've seen them. But what amazed me about the Beast Forum is just the sheer volume of the people on there. As I say, 100,000 plus members on there. Whereas I go to something like the Gassy Forum, where a proctophiles meet, and there are, you know, maybe 10 or 12 people who are on there. You know, and that's the thing about, as I say, this book could not have been written 20 years ago, because the internet has meant that if you've got one person who does something that people consider sexually bizarre in one country, the internet provides a way that they can talk to somebody 6,000 miles away who might share that particular behavior. You know, if you've got to remember is, you know, back in the 1970s, the way people would interact is basically through writing mail to each other. Now, of course, with the internet, it's instantaneous. Whatever you're into, you'll find something on the net, on the internet. And that's why, you know, somebody, I mean, I'm often considered one of the kind of forefathers of what we call cyber psychology. I was one of the first people that started researching, researching online behaviors. You know, I talked earlier in the interview about internet addiction. Well, you know, I do find how people's behavior online and how it changes online absolutely fascinating. And as I say, you know, the point is that sex online has also changed the way that people view sex and consider sex, because it's a new medium. And as I say, it's that way that people can, you know, talk to people or interact with people that ordinarily 20 years ago they just could not have done that. The internet has actually brought that to the fore now.
I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is, to many of us, utterly repugnant. Obviously, things like zoophilia it's beyond. Yeah. It's awful, horrendous. Yeah. But there are some things in the book which you've already talked about, which are amusing. Okay, they are less problematic. And one example is people who crank their cars and push their pedals. There are fetishes for that, right?
Yeah, there's whole websites, video. I mean, the number of car cranking videos that are online, and pedal pushing, damsel in distress. I mean, in fact, a lot of these actually kind of cross over. You'll notice in the book, I'll talk about one thing and make reference to other things. Yes. But it just amazes me. You know, with car cranking fetishes, of course, it's for it's usually, you know, a very attractive, you know, these are male dominated, you know, pretty woman who are, you know, pedal pushing or car cranking. And it, you know, you can see that, you know, again, it's like this classically conditioned response is that, you know, you see a beautiful woman sitting on a car, and then you start to associate cars with something sexual. And then there's the subdivision of that, you know, the car cranking, the pedal pushing. Again, it just, you know, there's obviously no academic literature on this, but when you go online and find that there's whole, you know, video websites of people sharing their car cranking videos or their pedal pushing videos or their damsel in distress videos, you know, whatever. Yeah, and some of them are amusing. And, you know, the thing about this, we don't know to what extent people, you know, that this is their main thing in their life, or whether it's just something that, you know, is a kind of sexual sideline for them. We have no idea at all, because there's no academic research on it.
It's fascinating. As Flicking points out in the comments, a guy married his car. And again, that's been normalized. We often see, don't we, these people who have apparently married a tree or married a car.
Well, in fact, the most famous one, if you want to go and watch a great video online, is a woman called Sheila Eiffel. She married the Eiffel Tower. So she believes that the Eiffel Tower is her husband. Okay. And, you know, that is, there's about 40 objectophiles in the world, or at least that we know of. So these are people that have married, who have sexual relationships with steam engines, bicycles, trains. But the Eiffel Tower, Sheila Eiffel, so there's a whole program out there. You type in Sheila Eiffel TV program, there's a whole documentary on her journey of her basically marrying the Eiffel Tower. Now, yeah, these are rare, and it will raise a smile to some people. But for Sheila Eiffel, she's absolutely in love with her husband, who happens to be the Eiffel Tower. I mean, and again, I mean, a lot of these, I mean, again, in my book, I just, describe people having sexual acts with their cars and other things. There's something called mechanophilia, which, anything that's having, sexual arousal to do with anything that's mechanical can include lots of different things. But there are, a number of academic case studies of people that have fallen in love with their cars, or other types of things like bicycles. But as I say, these are all case studies, and that's what interests me. I'm not interested in something like paedophilia where there's whole libraries. Or what I'm really interested in is the things that people haven't really looked at.
That is what's brilliant about it. Literally brilliant. Lisa, I kind of think I'm going to ask this again, but I do think that we might have answered this, but I'm just going to double check. Lisa says, are paraphilias mainly but not exclusively male dominated? Now, you did touch on that.
Yeah. So basically, most paraphilias are male dominated, but some, there are things. So in the book, I do something called hybristophilia. So people, it's basically people who are attracted to criminal activity, or criminals. So, but this is mostly females who, falling in love with serial killers. Okay. So, that is far more female dominated. The example I just gave you earlier, dacrophilia, seems to be more female dominated than male dominated. But most of the paraphilias I write about in my books are male based, without a doubt.
Got you. So Awaken says, this fella's on the wind up. This is serious, isn't it, what you're doing here?
Well, I think it's serious. As I say, I'm, read my book. It's, I'm not, like you say, some you will find, say it's the ick factor. Some you'll find amusing. But, I try and evidence everything that I've done. Obviously, there are some things I've written about that there's never been an academic paper written about it, but you just go in, type the word that I've looked at online. You'll find online groups out there. There's another, for instance, there is, I'm not a wind up. This isn't a wind up at all. Sorry, I've just seen the thing that's just flashed up on screen. Do people get married to pavements? I've not heard of anybody getting married to pavements, but there is certainly out there a man who was caught fornicating in a pavement. Okay, so not married to a pavement, and I haven't covered pavements in my book.
Lord.
So there is. So yeah, as I say, almost anything you can think of, there'll be something out there.
I've very much enjoyed this conversation, Mark. We kept you on slightly longer than I intended to, but thank you so much for being a good sport. Absolutely fascinating, everybody. I will put a link to the book in the description. I've literally never seen anything like it in my entire life. Sexual Perversions and Paraphilias, an A to Z, by Dr. Mark Griffiths and edited by Mike Sutton. Brilliant work. Thank you so much, Mark. Leave us with a parting shot.
Okay, my parting shot. One thing that did make me smile, there's something called klismophilia, which are people who are sexually attracted to enemas. In the book, I've got a lovely example from a genuine case of somebody who went to hospital and had to have a piece of concrete removed from their rectum. Basically, him and his boyfriend were fooling around. This was the quote in the case study. And they basically poured concrete into his partner's rectum, and unfortunately, the concrete set. So I did find this case study really amusing. Might be too much information at this time in the morning, but yeah, there are lots of little things in the book. So that's my parting shot for you today, Sonia.
Well, thank you. We very much enjoyed it. Literally, I think you've inspired a whole live chat to come up with all manner of things. Thank you so much, says Kat, and so say all of us, everybody. Dr. Mark Griffiths. What a joy. Thank you, Mark. Have a brilliant weekend. Take good care of yourself. Absolutely brilliant. Of course, I love, me, people. I love something a bit different, right? Hi, people, says me. Hi, me. You've just come in at the end of a paraphilia talk. My brain doesn't stop making images. Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? There's so much else in there that I didn't dare go into, including the paraphilia in which people derive sexual pleasure from viewing, smelling, or handling feces. It's called coprophilia. My brain. Yes, I know. It's all too much concrete. And there was a funny one. There you go. Sail away. That's funny. Brings a new meaning to cracks in the pavement. Sorry, that's absolutely wild. Absolutely wild. Brilliant guests. So we do have brilliant guests. All three brilliant guests today. Right. Let's switch it up, people. Let's switch it up a gear. Okay. Let's switch it up a gear. I want to talk about Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves is, of course, the Chancellor of the Exchequer now, and a great friend of Israel, although not so much farmers, as we've heard today. And she, as we know, unveiled her very biased budget this week. The headlines were absolutely screaming, and with good reason. Highest tax ever. And honestly, if a picture paints 1,000 words, what does this one paint? So what we see here, this is the official picture released by the Treasury and taken at number 11 Downing Street, which is the official home for the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And there she is at her desk. And the other picture is of Jeremy Hunt. He's equally vile Chancellor there. Jeremy Hunt, the man whom MSM hate having to talk about because they constantly mispronounce his name for good reason. So what we have there is Hunt sitting in front of Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor, Nigel Lawson, and Reeves, and actually, incidentally, that picture of Nigel Lawson was chosen by Rishi Sunak when he became Chancellor. And Reeves has replaced it with an image of Ellen Wilkinson, who was one of the founding members of the Communist Party of Great Britain. And these things, of course, are not coincidental, or that she's definitely giving us an important message here. And what I can say is prepare for harsh-sterity, right? It's like austerity, but it's delivered by people who in a short time have come to be seen as absolute savages. They'd been preparing people for a month that it was going to be bad, and it is. And I do think that this image really is about, I mean, the thing is, they're not even bothering to hide it anymore. They simply don't even need to bother hiding it anymore. They are confident that they have us whipped into compliance, into silence. If only they knew, who's going to tell them? Who's going to tell them that we are waking people up exponentially and things cannot continue to exist how they are? Okay? Simple as that, right? And but anyway, here she is pretending to be hard at work with a communist in the background. And so I thought I'd do a little bit of a deep dive on her and what she had to say. And it's really interesting. I think it's interesting that I always try not to be that person who remarks on the way that people look, and I'm more interested in the substance of them. But with her, I find it difficult not to, because I do think that what we are inside shows on our faces. And Reeves has very sharp and pointed features, which are often associated with spite and cruelty. And I can see that written all over this budget, all over it. And of course, it is not a coincidence, as we know, that Gates and Larry Fink from BlackRock visited Reeves and Keir Starmer just before the budget. It's not a coincidence that Reeves went off to the US and talked to the IMF people before the budget, because it's a globalist budget. That's what it is. It's a budget for the UN's 2030 to fulfill the tenets that are set out there. And the thing about this particular budget, right, was the continued nods to overseas agendas. So she was very clear, Ukraine, right? And don't forget, Zelensky was recently at number 10 as well with his begging bowl, but he doesn't need to be because they're completely on board, right? And she made clear, she said 3 billion a year to Ukraine for as long as it takes. That's what she said, for as long as it takes. For as long as what takes? To bankrupt the UK? And this is the problem, is these people are very much seen as traitors because they answer to other foreign powers. And then, of course, there is Israel and the Holocaust. Miss Reeves has received money from Labour's Friends of Israel, and she's now saying that we will be giving 2 million a year to the Holocaust memory, right? it's just absolutely insane. I don't know about you, but that 2 million could be spent elsewhere. Holocaust has the best public relations in history. Why do they need to plow 2 million more into education? Because they want to batter children over the head, right? Do not forget this. Do not forget this. That's the whole idea. And then did you see them laughing at us? They put out this poster, right? Beer 1p off. And all of them, the Labour MPs, were really keen to harp about it. And when she mentioned it in the budget, there was like large cheers for it. Actually, one of the most enthusiastic cheers in the chamber. And as I say, they even put out posters, which was like 1p off your beer, 1p off your beer. You're stiffing us left, right, and centre. You're taking away our food supply, but you think that you can put out a post saying 1p off the beer. You know what this was? This was absolutely an up yours to us. It was. They're laughing at us, no doubt about it. So, Rachel Reeves, it is a budget fit for a Fabian, because she is a Fabian through and through. We've talked about the Fabian Society here before. The Fabian Society is a far left society, and it was formed to support the Labour Party, and the Fabian Society's tentacles spread throughout society. And one of the things about the Fabian, I was reading a recent article about the Fabian Society, and it was actually dated the 19th September 2024, and it was about Reeves' budget. And it was actually the article was about climate crisis and wealth creation. And the whole focus, so what they were saying about her upcoming budget was that she must tackle, because what she had said is, I want the electorate to judge me by my actions on tackling climate change. Well, anybody around here knows that's poo pants, or in fact, as Gazza so beautifully put it, nut zero, right? And in this article from the Fabians, and don't forget, Fabians have great influence on this woman, because not only is she a Fabian, she's been put through their schooling. She went to the London School of Economics. That was formed by the Fabians. Right. So she is an absolute Fabian through and through. And this article said, if the world does not reduce emissions enough, every nation will suffer increased severe weather disasters. Food will become scarce, and we will face increasing numbers of climate refugees. Yet there are still upward pressures on worldwide emissions. These include the massive emissions due to wildfires, increased demand for air conditioning, and the increasingly vast amounts of electricity AI is likely to use. Our reduction in emissions must go beyond our current targets. So these people want to even go beyond what the United Nations have set out in their sustainable developments, right? So just bear in mind that the Fabians are on par with WEF, World Economic Forum, and this is the chancellor for both of them. And that is the budget we've got. And obviously, bear in mind, communism, of course, it's socio-political, it's philosophical, it's an economic ideology within the socialist movement. And the goal is to create a communist society. And a communist society would involve the absence of private property and of social classes. Basically, we would all become one, right? And ultimately, money and the state. Remember, you will own nothing and you will be happy. I have a very long memory, right, for people who tick me off. And Rachel Reeves is one of them. I remember her 11 years ago when she was announced to be the shadow secretary for the Department of Work and Pensions. And her opening shot showed me what a very harsh, cruel, punishing individual she is, right? She went immediately after people on benefits, set out to demonize them, very much part of austerity. And that is why she's been chosen for the job, because she's hard. She's hard through and through. It's not a coincidence that the very first announcement she made was to take away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners, which at the moment looks likely to affect 75% of pensioners. They're not all living life on, highs, not at all. For some people, it really will be the difference between eating and heating this year. So yes, the thing is, after Rachel Reeves had done this kind of editorial in The Guardian, actually, The Guardian Observer, and it said, Labour will be tougher than Tories on benefits. promises new welfare chief. Imagine that. Labour, tougher than Tories on benefits when most people are in work benefits. And that's when I realised this woman is not Labour as we have traditionally come to know them. Not at all. Not at all. I saw her in Parliament not long after that. As I say, a flicker of recognition crossed both of us because I was quite politically active at the time as a journalist when I thought it was worth lobbying MPs. There was a time when I believed that. She's been a member of Parliament for Leeds West and Pudsey, formerly Leeds West since 2010. And as I say, Fabian through and through. So expect plenty more of this. London School of Economics and Political Science type behaviour from her. She is literally the woman for the job. She's been chosen. No doubt about it. Unquestionably. Unquestionably. Let's have a look at some of your comments. Yes, I mean, that is the reality, synchronized. They have no idea what it's like to struggle financially. Oh, what's just logged back in? Sorry. Have I missed the sex chat bit? Yes, Craig, you have. But you can, the great thing about us here is that you can listen on playback. We could turn the, what's this, Sean? That's Sean. Beyond stupidity, we could turn the country completely off, complete shutdown. It would make no difference to the climate. Not a jot. Climate crisis is a scam. Cash cow for 0.01%. There you go. 180k for a COVID czar. Yes, absolutely. Oh, what's that? She had to only for saying it out loud. Right. Oh, that's, there we go. They're jumping. Reeves said that after IDS, DWP been found to have killed disabled people. Obviously, that was opinion. Obviously, I don't need IDS suing me, although I did chase him outside Parliament. And Esther McVeigh, Fester McVeigh, just seeing her incenses me, says Heppelwin. Who's got an annoying haircut? Oh, I see. Yeah, it was mad. Craig, that was a mad conversation, but I kind of liked it. Anyway, let us move on. I've got so much to cover, and I think I'm going to have to say some of it for Monday. But just to say, the allegations against former Harrods boss Mohamed Al-Fayed have massively grown since we covered the story about a month ago, following a new documentary which featured allegations of abuse against him. So it's now gone from 19 accusers, and the law firm are now working with over 400. Now, me personally, I'm already nervous because I know how extraordinarily greedy lawyers can be. And I also know that there will be opportunists muddying the water and who fancy a chunk of money. These things are never as straightforward as they seem, but I am in no doubt whatsoever that Mohamed Al-Fayed was carrying out abuse on an industrial scale. I'm in no doubt about that. Right. So there was a press conference yesterday. Justice for Harrods survivors was held by the barristers who represent some of the accusers. A first letter of claim has now been sent to the department store, calling it the beginning of the formal legal process. Bruce Drummond, one of the barristers, said they were handling 421 inquiries regarding the industrial scale abuse, with the majority contacting them from the UK, while claims against Al-Fayed and Harrods are coming from all over the world. Drummond said it was the worst case of corporate sexual abuse of women that the world has ever known. It's really easy to say that when somebody is dead. Oh, Shug just said something. You just took it right out of my mouth. What's going? Always comes out after they pop their clogs, funnily enough. Stephen is scared to put the heating on. No. Now, Chella, some did. Why did those ladies not come forward when he was alive? Some did. That from about 2017 onwards, there were reports being made to the Metropolitan Police, but there was this whole issue that we've heard where Harrods were sending hampers to the Metropolitan Police, complimentary Christmas hampers. And Randy is going to have a serious chat with God about all this when I am, yes, absolutely, was fired the same person as Adnan Khashoggi. Look at photos. Oh, Sugar Puff, what an interesting question. But no, I don't think so. Simon said he hated MI5. But also, Chella, just to go back to your question, because I think it's an important one, actually. Sometimes people are so petrified of the power of these very powerful people that they have no alternative but to wait until they die before they say anything, because they're so scared that they're going to come after them. So I think that is also interesting. But I am concerned because I know how greedy barristers and lawyers can be. You know, so it is problematic, and it's easy, isn't it? And now they're also talking about a class action. Said that the team were announcing a class action against the Al-Fayed estate, noting that much of the abuse occurred throughout his empire of business and personal properties, including his Park Lane apartments and yachts. And they are saying there is a team of enablers. Yes, there is. Because you cannot carry out industrial scale abuse at your place of business, at your place of residence, on the boats. You cannot do any of that without the help of enablers. And they are saying that there is clear evidence of a team of enablers who supported Fayed. We expect that these enablers will eventually be named by the press and face further consequences, the lawyer said. And of course, all of this has followed the BBC documentary by Keaton Stone that set the ball rolling. And we had Joanna Britton on the other week talking about that. And the alleged new survivors from all over the world, UK, America, Canada, Europe, Australia, and Asia. So we shall see. We shall see indeed. And there's a story that kind of links to it that I want to talk about. And let me bring it up if I can. Let me find it. First of all, thank you to all the wonderful people, by the way, who've emailed me to tell me I have an impersonator on Rumble who's trying to get people to call a telephone number in the States. Needless to say, it's not me. But here's the thing. On every one of your emails, and you sent me the link from Rumble where it said somebody had commented after you'd commented on one of my videos, and I can't see it. I'm wondering if this account has already blocked me in some way, so I can't actually see what they're saying. So if somebody could actually kindly show me, I think somebody did, and then I tried to trace the account and I couldn't trace the account either. So I suspect they've already blocked me. But thank you. It's not me. It's not me. And I really appreciate you telling me, all of you. Thank you so much. Very, very much appreciated. But this story, right, that I want to go back to, which kind of, it does link to Harrods in some respects. And our viewers are deeply disturbed by the Prusak case. And Oliver sums it up very well. Dear Sonia, I'm writing to you about the case in the news about a former US air pilot cleared of kidnapping and sexually assaulting a 9-year-old girl. She was apparently kept in his apartment for 2 hours. And then Oliver goes on to say something which was absolutely brilliant and which I cannot at this moment talk about because let me just give you some backstory, right? So I looked into this story. I discovered that on Tuesday, this man had been found not guilty for that crime that Oliver mentions, but then promptly charged for another one, which means I have to be careful because it's now a live case again. However, I can talk about what is already out there in the public domain regarding the first trial and which would not be seen as prejudicing the case. And as I say, Oliver sent me other information, fascinating information, which sheds a very interesting light on this individual and which I cannot talk about at this moment in time just because of the live proceedings. But Oliver, I have that stored up, ready to talk about it when there is a conclusion to these proceedings. So let me tell you a little bit about this story, right? So this pilot was cleared of abducting the girl and it was outside Harrods. The girl from France had become separated from her family on the 22nd of April. Robert Prusak is a former US Air Force pilot. He was accused of kidnapping the 9-year-old girl outside Harrods. He was said to have approached the girl who was from France on a trip, and she had become separated from her family near the central London department store. The prosecution alleged that Prusak then led her back to his hotel apartment and drugged her before taking her to Hyde Park and inappropriately touching her. But Mr. Prusak's evidence was that he was only trying to help the girl, who cannot be named for legal reasons, and wanted to keep her safe. He told jurors that he decided to help when he spotted her because he would have wanted someone to help his own daughters. He said, when I spotted her, I thought she seemed lost because she was looking around like she was searching for someone. Mr. Prusak said that he had asked the girl how long she had been there, how long she had been since she had seen her parents. She raised 3 fingers, which he took to mean 3 minutes. He claimed to have asked the 9-year-old if her parents were shopping, but said the girl told him her family had been heading to a museum, but he was not sure which one. Mr. Prusak said he started walking the girl towards a museum to hopefully intercept the parents and searched on his phone for police stations, and surprisingly they were fairly far. He passed on what his intention was. He said to keep her safe and reunite her with his parents. And when asked why they did not go to the museum, he said it started to rain more heavily and they had not seen the girl's parents by this time. The pilot said they went to his flat to search for a police station as his apartment was very close by and he knew how to get there quickly. He said, I had found 3 police stations on Google Maps, but there didn't seem to be a direct route to any of them. It started raining and the rain was dropping on my phone. So because my apartment was near, I thought it would be best to go there. While there, he gave her a drink of water and let her watch TV. That is his account. Tested the girl's urine after she was found, detected the active ingredient in Benadryl, which he denied and was not found guilty of giving her Benadryl. Prusak said he and the girl left his apartment after he found a nearby fire station on his iPad. Fire station, that's not a police station, where he intended to seek help. And then what was happened, he was walking with the girl. They walked past the Israeli embassy. Police were aware she was missing and he was arrested on the same day after they were spotted walking past the Israeli embassy. He was searched and said, I was just trying to help her out. He denied all the charges against him. Jurors had asked if there was any DNA evidence to link him to her in terms of an assault. And that was just over. And there was and the judge said that there was no DNA evidence. He was found not guilty of 3 counts of sexual assault of a child under the age of 13. He was also cleared of 1 count of kidnapping, 1 count of committing an offence of kidnapping with an intent to commit a sexual offence, and 1 count of administering a substance with intent. Judge Edward Connell told Mr. Prusak that he was acquitted and that he was free to go. Then shortly after he was freed, he was arrested again at Isleworth Crown Court on suspicion of possessing and making an indecent image of a child, which Met Police claimed they found this on an electronic device. So by Wednesday morning, he had been charged with 1 count of possessing indecent images of a child and another count of making an indecent image of a child. And so there we are. It's a live investigation. He was cleared of the kidnap of the child and then immediately rearrested and then charged with 2 counts of making indecent images of a child. And Oliver, the information you gave me, Oliver, I was going to use it today until I realized that he had been charged, which of course I can't. And I think this is an interesting story. It's a very curious story. The police must have been absolutely gutted with the outcome of that trial. Must have been gutted. So Hope, Love and Peace said, who was shutting down it all down whilst he was alive? Going back to Mohamed Al-Fayed. Well, it would appear that the police were not following through appropriately. Then, of course, there are his handlers and enablers around him, of whom we are shortly presumably going to get some names. There's a whole team that he had around me. Women were given NDAs, don't forget. So there were so many factors that were determined to keep it silent until after his death. So there you go. So thank you, Oliver, for raising that to me. I very much appreciate that. I do. Chella said our judges really need looked at. Some deep diving is required. Indeed, my dear, indeed. And just very quickly, of course, Elon Musk, who's if Trump gets in, Elon Musk has been offered a place in government. Elon Musk was summoned to court over his $1 million giveaways to registered voters. Judge in Philadelphia has ordered him to address a civil case by the city's top prosecutor to stop Mr. Musk and his political action committee, American PAC, from giving the cash away. They say it's an illegal lottery. And Musk has basically promised to give $1 million, which equates to approximately £772,000 UK sterling each day to registered voters in swing states who have signed his online free speech and gun rights petition. But it is increasingly looking likely, according to Philadelphia's district attorney, Larry Krasner, that this may be illegal. It's American. elections are completely different in America, as we heard from Callum, than they are in the UK. America PAC is just one of several major political action committees in the US. It's just as there's people there with an awful lot of money, right? And then the other thing about Musk, which was pointed out to me by the good monkey on X, good monkey, I love monkey, and that was Elon Musk had shelled out $35 million on a multi-mansion Texas estate for his 11 children, right? Interesting and curious story. It's a compound in Austin, Texas, for his volume of children, 11 children that we know of, and their mothers, to apparently live together as one happy family. Shorebird. It's also for his workers. Now, this is curious. Musk knows what is going on. He's now being called, according to Forbes, the world's richest man. Is this a compound to protect him and his loved ones when the stuff hits the fan? That's what I want to know. And the idea that he's bought this with the aim of bringing together all his exes and all his children, whether his exes want it or not. One certainly does. Shai von Zillis, an executive at his brain tech startup Neuralink, mother to 3 of his children, has reportedly already moved into the Texas compound. I think it's interesting. Don't forget, he often talks, he talks about lots of things. One of the things he talks about is a depopulation program, but he's a typical technocrat. And that is, even with his own children, he's also donated sperm, because these people often think that their seed is superior to everybody else's. And Musk has a lot of family friction, so I don't quite know how he's intending to bring them all together. Tan wants to know, is Lucy Brown invited again? Yes. Why? Is there any reason not? BBC's horrible, Simon. Shake hands with her and find out. Maybe a clone, though. Who are we talking about? And what's happening in Valencia? That is just awful. How devastating is that? How absolutely devastating. Flash floods. We've been told it's not yet finished. Extreme weather to come. And there comes a point when we've got to start questioning on a global scale, what is the impact of weather manipulation? And, you know, it's interesting when you look into the history of Valencia, and there's at least 95 already killed. And I'm so sorry to have to report that. It's just awful, absolutely desperate situation, absolutely desperate. But it's very interesting that Valencia became the first city in the world to verify its tourism carbon emissions, which I think is curious. So basically, there was this long-standing strategy to create a bike-friendly environment, which literally Valencia is a blueprint of the 15-minute cities, right? What's that about? What is that about? Okay. And by the way, this is not the first Valencia flood. There was actually a Valencia flood on the 14th of October, 1957. It resulted in significant damage to property and caused the deaths of at least 81 people. So this is not a first. No, it's not. So many places getting flooded, says Shug. But my thoughts are with them all. But we are outrageously tampering with weather. There are direct energy weapons. We know all this. And yet we don't expect there to be consequences. Of course, there's going to be consequences. Hugh has got a good idea. Hugh, does it involve me doing another hour on here? Because that is not a good idea, my friend. Morning Star. Oh, what's this? It's not what goes into a person's heart that makes them evil. It's what comes out, or anything can come out of the heart. So be on your guard. We are outrageously tampering with life as a whole. They can stuff their 15-minute cities, says Stephen. Soul Sound says we are outrageously tampering with life as a whole. We really are. And Chris said, good old weather warfare. And Jacqueline, you're absolutely right, Jacqueline. Of course, weather manipulation has probably been going on longer than we know. I agree. Absolutely. Yes, drumstick. Absolutely shocking. Valencia got 1 year worth of rain in a few hours. Morning, Sandra, says Eileen. Morning. Does this go back to when strangers walk up to me in the street and say, is your name Sandra Ponton? Hilarious. Good morning to you, Eileen, lass. Right, people. Just to say, tomorrow, Only Cans. Only Cans is streaming live tomorrow. Let me find out details here. Streaming live. Only Cans, of course, is Craig and Zoe. Zoe is one of our mods. I will make sure to put a link to the stream in the description, and they're going to be tackling some very interesting things, including Julia Wandol's recent claims, the latest news in Madeline's case, online trolls, and their upcoming part 2 on Jean-Benet Ramsey, and also Wizard, who's often in our comments, like OnlyFans, is also tackling the fraud. Yes, I said it. That is Julia Wandelt pretending to be Madeleine McCann, right? And as Wizards has pointed out in the videos that he has done this week, and I'll also put a link to Wizards' videos as well as OnlyCans, but as Wizard has pointed out this week, right, Mariana Spring, you know, BBC's missed disinformation, she went to meet Julia in Poland and claimed that Julia knew she wasn't Madeleine and she had apologised to the McCanns. So why is suddenly Julia Wandol ringing the McCanns? Is Julia Wandol a plant to stop us all talking about McCann's? Because that's one of the things that Craig suggested to me that is this creating, Craig, I'm paraphrasing you, I hope you don't mind, but Craig suggested to me, and I think it's worth considering, suggested to me that this crazy individual who is Polish and is not Madeleine McCann is ringing Kate and Jerry McCann. Is this going to make Kate and Jerry McCann come back out again with the backing of the public saying, oh, Kate and Jerry are being harassed again? Is she that person? Is Julia Wandol that person? She's not legit. The only thing that she's legit about is actually she clearly has some problems. And I feel for her on that level, but I'm struggling to feel for her at all now because she is absolutely exploiting this story and exploiting the British public who are still paying for an ongoing police investigation. So OnlyCans tomorrow. And Zoe, you might want to put a link in the description now. Yes, Carol, I agree. She's loving the attention. Clearly, she got problems, right? Tomorrow, 18:15 UK time, people. Thank you, Square Table. Yep, my blue eyes came with my body. They're real, right? She's about as legit as the McCanns themselves, says Brit Indian. Controversial. Yes, Randy. And can I just say thank you for your generosity this morning, you kind people donating to me. I very, very much appreciate that. Everything goes into Wake Up, everything. And you know my ambition, and that is by the end of this year to completely stop ads, to go completely self-sufficient, and to be able to bring in a team. That is my aim, and thank you. Plant is fine. We need to water plant for eco-friendly society, says Tan. Maddie is an anagram of I am dead. That's creepy. And it would appear true. Right. So don't forget, OnlyCans tomorrow, 6:15. Please watch, and I will put a link in the description. But well done to both OnlyCans and Wizard for tackling the fraud that is Julia Wandol. Well done. Well done to you all. There are some stories that I'm forced to save until Monday, including Hazel asking me about the Levi Davis case. Levi Davis, of course, is a former rugby player, and this week he's been now missing 2 years. I will go into that in more depth on Monday, Hazel, I promise. I will also go into more depth on Monday. Matt's email about 5G coming to the tube. Matt, I hate to tell you, it's already here, mate. But because of you, I did a proper deep dive, which I don't have time to go into right now, but I will do a deep dive on that on Monday. I promise you. Crazy Bunny is pointing out it is now 11:11. So yes, I will go into that on Monday. I promise, Matt. And there's also Wahid contacted me about troubling underground ads, and I will also tackle that on Monday as well. ISIS gestures on London Underground. And anybody seen, by the way, that new series on Paramount called Curfew? It's about men under lockdown. It's seen as cool, but this is conditioning, right? The idea is that a woman's body is discovered. She's been murdered during the night, and they can't understand it because it's a world in which men are bound by a curfew from 7 p.m. to 7 p.m. And so they're like, how could the woman be killed because men are subject to a curfew? Because in this series, they cannot contemplate the idea that women can be villains. Right. And it's out on Paramount. It's a 6-part thriller. It's an adaptation of Jane Cowie's novel After Dark. But here's where I thought it was interesting. Not only do I think it's predictive programming, curfew is a self-imposed boundary, says, but I think to a degree it's predictive programming. It also, again, sets men again as the problem, which is we don't need that. We really don't need that. There are always bad people in this world. But guess who? Let me see. Oh, please tell me I've got it here. Guess who they've got in curfew, like pushing it as if he's debating it on a TV show. I'll give you a guess. The name rhymes with sign, and he's often called vile. None other than Jeremy Vine. Should there be a male curfew? This is a clip from the program in which he is as a fictional idea debating on his not fictional show whether there should be a male curfew or not. It is disgusting and it is sexist, Rachel. It's a very weird program. Everything is conditioning and programming, says Kat. Him, says Simon. Yes, Sally. The men will dress as women. Isn't it illegal to talk BS during elections here then? What are we talking about? I have no idea what's going on. Lucy Brown called I enjoyed some of her video, but oh, right. Get on your bike, mate. What in the world? Yeah, we do not keep neat. Listen, we know there are problems in this world. We absolutely know it. But this whole idea where we constantly portray men as predators helps nobody. And I'm disturbed by it, frankly. I'm disturbed by that new program. And I will also be going more deeply into geoengineering on Monday. Thank you to Peter and Mrs. Pirate for your geoengineering images. Much, much appreciated. And I see this week that Ofcom fined GB News £100,000 for breaking due impartiality rules. And the idea was about the People's Forum, the Prime Minister, where John Watt actually asked Rishi Sunak a question. And Ofcom said, given the seriousness and repeated nature of this breach, Ofcom has imposed a financial penalty of £100,000 on GB News Limited. GB News is challenging the original breach decision by a judicial review. That's going to be interesting. And so much more that I haven't been able to get through today, including viewer emails from Carl and Claire. But thank you for them. I appreciate it. So I'm going to come on to our last point, right? Controlled opposition. Our last point. This week, I heard a comment and it really resonated with me. Okay. And the comment was, independence can be a trauma response. And I went, oh my days. I am notoriously independent, even to the fact that I'm running the whole show here, right? And I am notoriously independent, and I learned to be independent. And I do suspect it is a trauma response from my childhood, where it was very, very difficult to ask adults for help, just because there was a lot of problems in our family home. Don't get me wrong, I'm not showing my family, beautiful family. My mum was actually dying literally from my birth, and my father had left when I was 3 permanently. So I think what happened was that from a very early age, I learned that I had to do things myself if I wanted to get them done. And what I realized is that many people feel really shamed into asking for help, sometimes as a trauma response. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to tackle that a little bit because it resonated so much with me. Rachel feels the same way. Who fixes your car, Sonia? I sold my car beyond belief because I'm buying a camper van. That's another story for another time, right? So let me talk about this. Independence as a response to trauma and the importance of being able to ask for help. And the thing is, asking for help is often portrayed by some people as a sign of weakness. It is far from it. It takes a lot to admit that you are struggling so much you actually need help external to yourself. And many people in deep emotional pain, such as from experiencing grief or a loss, they expect to be able to handle pain on their own. I know I have often, and that doesn't help me. It doesn't help other people. I've learned to reach out in my later years, but it took me an awful long time. And I think some people are so conditioned as a trauma response that they never ask for help. And it doesn't always help them. And are you the type who does everything by yourself? Because you know what they say sometimes, right? And that is a problem shared is a problem halved. And I think it works on the same basis, because the problem about independence is great. It is fantastic. Independence is great for like your artistry and your creativity. Independence isn't so great when you're kind of independent even though you're kind of like, you have relationships with people, because there are many benefits for asking support, not least it brings, it's intimate. There's an intimacy that comes when you ask people for help and ask for support. And when you're shouldering the burden of everything on your own on a constant basis, is absolutely exhausting, right? Are you the type who finds it difficult to ask for help? Are you? And honestly, there are so many benefits attached to it. You know, you can be more productive. You can make more money. You can cover more ground when you ask for help, right? And I take that point. If you want a job doing properly, my mum always said, that's right, do it yourself. And that was what I learned as well. Exactly that. Chella is a loner, but there are times when she wishes she could reach out, just not there yet. Well, that's fine, because I completely relate to that, Chella. I completely do. And sometimes, right, people are so independent and not prepared to ask for help because they overgive themselves, right? Is it a fact that you simply prefer to receive, to give rather than receive? And what is that about, right? Some people are like really embarrassed they love buying gifts for other people, but really embarrassed to receive stuff themselves. It could also be that you are codependent. Do you feel that you can't ask your partner or friend for help because they need you more? Is that the case? Because your needs matter. Yeah. And also some people are trapped in a victim mindset. They feel that they can never ask for help because they have to struggle alone. This is what they're used to. Yes, Cavan, I have Irish eyes. I do indeed. And also, what about being counter dependent? You know, going back to what I said, and that is, do you see asking for help as a result of being foolish or weak? It's none of those things. Or do you have trust issues? Is it a fact that you've been let down so much that you're just so sick and tired of investing in anybody else? Halo said, some of us are all alone and have no one to ask. Well, Halo, one of the things about this live stream is we become a family. Does it, Sarah? It makes perfect sense to you, does it? No problem, not at all. Chella is a giver. Yes, yes, yes. I feel guilt to ask my wife for help as she is struggling also. You see, here's the thing, is that you also have a right to ask for help, MT70. Yes, you do. Final space. Yes. And Sergeant Grumpy, you're absolutely right. Many people do let you down, which is why I do so much on my own. But not everybody lets you down. And what kind of world is it if we don't feel that we can rely on those we love? Sugar's a loner. Okay, I can relate to that, Fox. Loner here. Don't trust many at all and find taking care of myself as much as possible as the best way. Well, Shug, you are... I mean, you're part of a family unit here, Shug. You've been with us now for like 4 years. Do you feel a sense of solidarity and family here? And that is flicking. Many people like to help you. Absolutely. Halo has become a loner too. And hugs for you, Halo, says MK. Independence is great, Vanessa says. But we all need help sometimes. Friends are to be treasured. A true friend shows love at all times and is a brother who is born for times of distress. Now, isn't that beautiful? We love that. So basically, we feel free to reach out. You're not alone. Then turning into a camper is cheapest. Yes. Maybe old fleet vans from auction gives you an idea of its history. Yes, Sugar Puff, I want to go on the road. Yes, I love that. Jan said, let's all get together. Oh, John from Coventry, rather. John, who often tells us about the street lights in Coventry. Let's all get together in the real world and go on a nature walk or something. I love that. And Teresa, loner here too, and hardly ever ask for help as I feel embarrassed about it. Got you, Gina. But also, I guess what I'm really saying is we've been conditioned a lot of the time. If you've experienced trauma, and I saw somebody say that they were orphaned at like 10, and I was like orphaned at 11. And again, I think it all plays into the same thing. I completely get it. But let's start learning to ask for help. And another reason why people don't ask for help is because they have low self-esteem and intimacy issues. And also have limiting beliefs that they don't ask for help because it's going to reflect badly on them. Your inner critic will always fight you, by the way, right? So I just hope that any of these words have touched people, and I know they have, and resonate. Marcuson, I completely agree with you. And I think that is something that we need to just put on the screen. Share the love. Simple as that. I'm a better mum as a lone wolf, says Sarah Jane. Get it? Randy wants a Sonia rally. Let's have a rally, kids. Let's get together. Let's have a people rally. Let's have a wake up rally. I mean, all of these things are on the cards. Absolutely. So I just want to say thank you all for joining me this morning. I very much appreciate it. Deeply appreciate it. And thank you for all of your contributions, whether they are emails or joining us in the chat or financial contributions. Everything counts around here. Everything. And I greatly appreciate you. And well, you know that I'm going to finish on a quote, right? First of all, just say thank you to my two brilliant mods, Zoe and Shin. Love them both very much. Please do not forget to watch Only Cans tomorrow. And as I say, I will put a link in the description. And I want to finish on a quote for all of those of us who struggle to ask for help, because actually we might be doing a disservice to other people, because this quote from Robert Ingersoll really sums it up. And that is, we rise by lifting others. Hallelujah to that. Have a beautiful weekend. Gorgeous, glorious people. I will see you Monday. Thank you for being very much part of this experience today. Take good care of yourself.